There are more reports that the war in Ukraine is causing some global food shortages. Ports in the Black Sea are blocked, Ukraine's grain silos are full, and fields have been destroyed during the war with Russia. To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, Ukraine's agriculture minister says around 25% of his country's arable land has been destroyed. How will that really impact the global food supply chain?
Yeah, well, there have been reverberations, and that's the point here. Obviously, we're facing, economic hardship, inflation all throughout the globe, caused by this war and caused by many other factors, including coming out of a pandemic and other political policies that have not worked, particularly in the West. But we did an article at the Foreign Desk really connecting the dots on how the war in Ukraine has directly affected food supplies, shortages, what countries are getting their supplies from Ukraine, and how this ongoing war, this lack of confidence in there being an end to the war, is really contributing to the markets and food supplies and the cost of basic supplies all throughout the world, and not to mention obviously gas prices and that connection. But obviously the war in Ukraine has taken a toll. We here in the United States, I think half the country or maybe more at this point are always rolling their eyes when President Biden and his administration try to pinpoint or peg the difficulties we're having on the war in Ukraine, because it's just a cop out, because there's many more reasons why we are having this economic hardship. But there are obviously there's some factual truth to why the invasion of Ukraine is contributing to this very, very awful world crisis.
Yeah, it's surprising. I was reading some of the recent statistics about how much grain Ukraine supplies to the world food market. It's incredible. Lisa, American military officials are alarmed as Russia has launched airstrikes against a U.S.-led coalition. It was a garrison used by U.S. troops to train Syrian fighters near Syria's southern border with Jordan. Do you think this may potentially bring the United States into the war?
Well, it won't directly bring them into a full-fledged war. I don't think it's going to go that far, but it's exactly what we've been seeing in that region, and particularly when Russia is concerned. This is a proxy war. It's hitting the United States and getting them back for the sanctions that we have placed on Russia for their invasion of Ukraine, and saying, look, it's not like we can't fight you or we can't go after your assets if you're not involved in the war. We can and we will. Now, remember, we entrusted Russia with what was going on in Syria under the Obama administration, when President Obama said the red line here is if the Syrians use chemical weapons. And then it turned out that they in fact did use chemical weapons, and Russia stepped in and said, listen, Barack, we've got this. Let us handle it, and we're going to punish the Syrians if we see that they use chemical weapons, and we'll take care of it. Well, that is coming back to bite us, as we see, because we entrusted them, we gave them full control, and obviously Russia has very much made its presence known in Syria, and they will use that to their advantage. Again, they have U.S. assets there, and they're able to go after us in a way that delivers the message right to Washington, D.C., without getting the United States boots on the ground in Ukraine or getting them involved in any other way. So, the foreign policy is always a full circle, and here it comes round and round. We are really paying for the weak foreign policy that we had under President Obama, and obviously the Biden administration being a continuation of that in many, many ways, particularly where Syria is involved, and now the handling of Ukraine and Russia, which is it's incredibly difficult. So, we don't really know how to handle the Ukraine-Russia situation other than praying that Putin takes this off ramp and kind of does his cease and desist on his own at some point. And we don't know when that point will be.
Yeah, Lisa, has there been any more discussion on if Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian President Putin will actually sit down and bring an end to this war once and for all?
Yeah, well, Zelensky's on board, and so are Western allies of Zelensky. They would love for Putin to sit down and have this conversation to, again, give some sort of end to this, give up some concessions, surrender, compromise, whatever it takes to put an end to this. But it seems like Putin, although we do not know the exact trajectory he is taking, he's become more rogue in recent weeks and days. And for that reason, we we wonder if he just thinks, you know what, I'm closer to the victory line than I was before. I don't know if I'm going to want to sit down and compromise just yet. And the numbers are not looking good. They're not in Ukraine's favor, even though the United States just pledged another $1 billion in aid. We're sending them more weapons. That's probably just more for the economy and business of selling military equipment than anything else, because it's a drop in the bucket when you look at the numbers, when you look at the percentage of territory that is in Russian control and the way that they're headed. They're not yet there to claim a full victory, but they don't want to back down either. And that's really the conundrum that we're stuck in here. How will this end? What kind of ending could it have? And will it get, or will it escalate to a point where we wish that we intervened in a more conclusive way?
Israeli and U.S. intelligence officials are keeping a close eye on Iran's construction of a new underground nuclear facility. Now, this massive facility can allegedly withstand bunker-busting bombs and cyber attacks.
Yes, very interesting how this is all going with the Iran regime. The United States still hopes that they will get an Iran nuclear deal, a new Iran nuclear deal, after President Trump withdrew from the previous one in 2018, and President Obama first got us into the first Iran nuclear deal in 2015. So the Biden administration is hoping to get a second version of the 2015 deal. But the Iran regime is flexing its muscles at the nuclear negotiation table. They have doubled down on the enrichment of uranium. They have taken down 27 or more cameras. The IAEA, which is the Atomic Energy Committee from the UN, they're the watchdog committee that's supposed to be really responsible for the surveillance of Iran's weapons programs and facilities. And they have denied access. So it doesn't look good at this point. So the Israelis have to do their own homework. They have to be prepared. And day after day, we get more reports that Iran is marching forward with beefing up its assets, beefing up its weapons program. And let me tell you, this is not for peaceful purposes the way that the Iranian regime once claimed it was. They're definitely moving into the rogue direction. And at this point, they don't have any fear of being open about it or boasting about it to the Biden administration. So I don't know how this is going to end up, but it's going to be very, very difficult to walk them back from where they are headed in terms of their weapons program.
Now, Israel's defense minister says his country is preparing offensive options against Iran in case they're needed. Lisa, tensions between Israel and Iran have intensified in recent weeks following the assassination of a top Iranian officer in Tehran last month.
You're right. So, regardless of what happens at the nuclear negotiation table, regardless of who is president in the United States and who's in the White House, the Israelis have to do their homework because they are within arm's reach of the Iran regime. And Iran has not been shy about threatening to take Israel off the map. And for that reason, the Israelis have gone after pinpointed and very, very targeted attacks against Iran's assets. So they have been hitting them in Syria quietly and very targetedly so that there are not no civilian casualties. They're going after their assets. And more recently, there were two nuclear leaders, top heads of their nuclear program. One was a member of the IRGC, which is the Revolutionary Guard. Those are also believed to be Israeli hits on Iran's soil. So obviously they are looking to avenge these murders. They want to get back at Israel. They are, again, chest thumping and going on with their nuclear program. And Israel says, we cannot afford to sit here right in your backyard and allow you to develop a weapon that you say has our name on it. So we will do what it takes in the most quiet and peaceful way and targeted way to minimize the threat that is pointed against us.
Iran's security forces say they're really clamping down on teachers' protests across the country. Thousands of educators, Lisa, rallied over the weekend against the Islamic government, demanding higher wages, human rights, and the release of their imprisoned colleagues suffering in a number of state-run prisons.
Right. And where are the teachers' unions? Where are the liberals of the world who are the so-called champions of human rights who have not spoken out about this, or the teachers that are being arrested on the streets of Iran this past weekend, hundreds rounded up for peaceful protesting. And again, they're only asking for their basic rights, their pensions, their human rights. They're asking for those who have been imprisoned to be released. This week actually marks the 13th anniversary of the Green Revolution in Iran. Those were the protests in 2009, where many teachers and many others came out and protested for human rights and for a toppling of the current regime, only to fall on deaf ears for the West. They did not get the support they wanted under the Obama presidency. And so they continue to come out onto the streets. This is a very important group of protesters because, again, teachers, they make minimum wage, they are treated like garbage, and they are saying, we're only asking for our basic rights. We're asking not to be imprisoned. We're asking for our human rights. We're asking for our pensions and basic things that teachers should receive as they are educating young people. This is also interesting as we have had weeks of protests in Iran, not just focused on teachers, but throughout the country, all people of all walks of life coming out onto the streets and saying, death to the supreme leader, death to the president, President Raisi, and again, not getting the support from the West that they would like. They know, and I've interviewed many Iranians during this time of protest who say, we just want support from the West. Verbal support is enough. We're not asking for weapons. We're not asking for money. All we want is a statement of support from the White House, and they have still not received that.
China has apparently cornered the market on pharmaceutical ingredients. Lisa, many people feel this may jeopardize national security in both the United States and Canada. How so?
Absolutely, this is awful, right? When you look at the monopoly that China has over so many items, and okay, well, basic goods, we can say that we're getting a discount, and goods are produced in a much cheaper fashion and easier fashion in China, which is why a lot of production went over to China and really boosted their economy there. But now, when you have sensitive equipment, when you have military equipment, you have cyber equipment and pharmaceutical equipment being made by the Chinese. I mean, how can we trust quality control? How could we trust anything when we are giving them literally this leverage over us here in the West to be the producers of these products? And what always happens here in the West is that we find out much later on. So there are recalls on very sensitive items. There are lawsuits. There are class action lawsuits, and the root of the issue is, let's not let the Chinese produce these sensitive products to begin with, rather than having recalls later on. And in terms of national security, in terms of the economy, in terms of all that we have entrusted China with, they are our enemy, and yet we allow them to have this leverage over us and have this control and monopoly over these very, very important and sensitive products.
Now, still with China, their Navy reportedly launched Asia's largest aircraft carrier. The country's third carrier, called Fujian, is pretty big too, displacing around 80,000 metric tons of water. By comparison, the USS Ronald Reagan and USS Abraham Lincoln, carriers that displace around 100,000 metric tons of water. China also says its Navy possesses 355 ships, and Lisa is slated to own 460 by the year 2030. How significant is this?
Extremely significant, extremely significant. We have had reports lately that say, hello, they're on our heels. And this only speaks to that and proves that they are. The United States, the West in general, we're not looking in the rearview mirror, and the Chinese are approaching. And they are approaching because that's their will and that's their agenda. So while we are not focused on on growth in many sectors, particularly military, the Chinese are extremely fixated on growing their might, and not only growing their might, but really boasting about it. They are very much interested in becoming a world power, showing that they're a world power, putting this growth and progress on display the way that they did with this carrier, and being able to say, we're playing with the big boys now. Not only are we playing with the big boys, we're almost at the level of competing with the United States. And that it's mind-boggling when you think about it. So unless we we wake up to this threat, we have to be ready to say that the Chinese are going to surpass us in the next 10, 20 years, as you stated. And that's the reality of it, because they have the agenda to do so. They have the money to do so. And with their copycat technology, with their ability to seize and copy, who knows what they're capable of doing. And in fact, that's their goal, to surpass the United States and the West.
Foreign Affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.